On November 25th, 2022, then 14-year-old Samantha Humphrey left her home on Parkwood Boulevard in the city of Schenectady and went to meet a 14-year-old boy who was her on-again, off-again boyfriend. She never came back home. Samantha's coat was found at the edge of the Mohawk River underneath the railroad bridge by Riverside Park in the Stockade neighborhood of Schenectady. On February 22nd, 2023, a fisherman in that same location spotted her body now floating close to the shore. Today, I can report to the community that the investigation into Samantha's death has culminated in a sealed indictment, charging that now 17-year-old she met with on the night of her death with one count of murder in the second degree for intentionally causing her death. Because the defendant was 14 at the time of the crime, he's being charged as a juvenile offender, and I cannot release his name or a copy of the indictment. Of course, whenever we do this, I have to remind you that an indictment is just a formal accusation. This defendant is presumed to be innocent unless and until his guilt is proven beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. Although I cannot talk about the evidence in this case, I can comment on the motive. We believe that Samantha thought she was pregnant and that this sometime boyfriend was the father. He wanted nothing to do with her baby and insisted that she get rid of the baby. Samantha told him that she wanted to keep the baby. That night they walked together to the area of the railroad bridge. They argued with each other. The argument turned physical and he caused her death by strangulation and asphyxiation. He then disposed of her body in the river. Autopsy revealed no evidence of whether she was pregnant. Another question which I am sure you will ask is why did this investigation take almost 2.5 years? Although this defendant was a suspect from the beginning, this investigation needed to answer several questions before we could bring charges. And in this kind of case, you have to understand that double jeopardy applies, and if we go too early with a case, before we have all of the evidence, that might jeopardize our success. Most of those questions involve particular evidence or issues which I cannot detail. But I can tell you that this was a very complicated investigation that involved video evidence from public and private sources, reams of phone and GPS extractions requiring detailed analysis, serology and DNA testing, court-ordered eavesdropping warrants in December of 2022, and then again in February of 2023 that produced hours of recordings, and expert consultation in the areas of hydrology and forensic pathology. I will tell you about one particular cause for delay. 5 months into the investigation, detectives became aware of the existence of an iPad that could contain useful evidence. But this iPad was an older model, no longer manufactured, that was both broken and protected by an unknown password. We purchased a used iPad of the same model and gave it to the New York State Police Computer Crime Unit. They rebuilt the old iPad and then used software to force entry. This procedure took more than a year to complete, but was ultimately successful. Another issue was the enormous amount of social media generated around this case. It was a giant distraction and caused law enforcement resources to be allocated to chasing down rabbit holes to disprove theories based on rumor and gossip. Almost none of that was of any use, but took time away from more important. I'm not saying that there was no help from the public. Useful leads were generated by members of the public who contacted the police, but this social media onslaught I refer to as something altogether different. But work on this case occurred steadily since Samantha disappeared. In the spring of 2024, investigators and prosecutors began meeting weekly to collectively discuss future steps. I thank SPD Assistant Chief Patrick LaGuire for organizing these meetings. In the back. Thank you, sir. Keeping the investigation focused and continuing to commit resources to follow those leads. For members of the Schenectady Police Youth Aid Bureau under the leadership of Sergeant Gabriel Linier, all worked on this case. Lead Detective Chris Wildaki performed extremely important work in this case and was an enormous resource to our office. Chris, thank you, sir. I'd all times in this investigation, we called upon various elements of the New York State Police for specialized assistance. Those include major crimes led by Senior Investigator Jason DeLuca. Jason is with us? Yes, sir. The Special Investigations Unit was represented there by Lieutenant Eric Harris. Thank you, Eric. The Underwater Recovery Team led by Sergeant Dave Fisher. Dave and his crew, there you go, dove into that river during November, well actually December, well yeah, November, late November, December, 16 times they were either in or on that river. The Aviation Unit, the Forensic Investigation Center, the Forensic Video Multimedia Service, Jim Kennedy and Jason Cooper did outstanding work. The Computer Forensic Laboratory with Senior Investigator Kevin Ryback. Kevin, are you here? Thank you, sir. And the New York State Intelligence Center. We can't thank them enough. State Police is represented by Captain Johnny Go, the Zone Commander in Fonda. Thank you, sir, for everything the State Police did in this case. We wouldn't be here without your services. Thank you. Finally, what this case required to move forward was a commitment of full-time resources from my office. That came in the person of Deputy Chief Assistant District Attorney Christina Kamani-Pelham, who is the Chief of our Homicide Bureau with almost 20 years' experience as a prosecutor handling many murder cases. Working with ADA Mike Nobles of her Homicide Unit and myself, Christina was able to clear her docket and work full-time in this investigation beginning in June. With the help of our investigators, John Madden and Marion McGovern, we interviewed all of the witnesses that had been identified. Once I was satisfied that all outstanding questions had been answered and that we had secured all of the potential evidence, I asked the Office of Court Administration to impanel a special grand jury to hear the case. I asked for that because I knew this presentation would require multiple sessions, and I knew that putting it before one of our sitting grand juries would ask them for an unreasonable amount of work and jeopardize their ability to handle their regular caseload based on ongoing business and arrests. In response to that request, on April 4th, 2025, Judge Elizabeth Gary, presiding judge of the Appellate Division, 3rd Department, signed an order authorizing the impanelment of that additional grand jury. We told this grand jury that in order to vote on this matter, they must be here for every session and hear substantially all of the evidence in the case, which is the legal rule. They all committed to that schedule, and to their enormous credit as citizens of this community, all 23 jurors heard all of the evidence we presented. They heard from 46 witnesses in 7 sessions of testimony over a 3-week period, including receiving 45 exhibits and evidence, although that number grossly underestimates the actual number of exhibits because many of those exhibits are multimedia in nature and contain subfiles of images, videos, and recordings, some of which are in the hundreds. They did return a sealed indictment, which was handed up yesterday to Judge Mark Blanchfield, who is the designated youth park judge for Schenectady County. He issued a warrant of arrest for this juvenile offender. He was taken into custody today by the Schenectady Police and members of the New York State Police Special Investigation Unit. I'll turn it over to Christina now to detail for you what happened at the arraignment for a couple